Well, switch to English. Okay, lesson 5. As always, we start with a summary of what we did in the last lesson. And so we talked about how to display text. That's kind of easy, right? You write this, and then you put it in quotes what you want to display, or if you have created a variable that contains a string, you just put the name of the variable. We talked about tables, which are awesome if you have column-oriented data. So it means that, for example, you would have a spreadsheet in Excel, and one column is full of numbers, the other one has some strings. And so that's something you can do with the table, and also could incorporate the headers to the name of each column. Here's an example of how we created the table called patients with this function table, and we put in these variables and row names. These were the last names of the patients we put in as row names. Something else we looked into was structures. So they take even more different types of data in different sizes, and you would put this data into fields. You access a field by putting the name of the structure dot the name of the field. So this was how we created the patient structure, and you had to put always first the name of the title you wanted to give to that column, and then the name of the variable. And some variables were numbers or logical. For example, smoker was a logical vector, and so in those cases you need to use num to cell to convert it, otherwise it doesn't come out properly. Maybe you remember from the exercise yesterday. Yeah, that's what I just said. Then we talked about scripting. So in order to create a script, we open a window in the editor. We save then, once we've created the script, we save it with whatever name we want to give it. It creates a .m file. To run the script, we either just type the name of that file in the command window and hit enter. That only works obviously if Matlab knows where to look for. So if the file you saved, the script you saved, is in your working directory, in your current working directory, or if you added it to the search path, right? Another way to do it is that you open in the editor, you open that script, and then you run it, and there's also some shortcuts. Afterwards I'm going to talk more about shortcuts. I think in Windows it's F5, in Matlab, in Mac for me it's Alt plus Command plus R. Well, I told you to put a lot of comments into your scripts so that you and other people can remember and find out what you did and why you did it. And then the good thing is to organize your script with sections, and you create a new section by doing double %sign space, or by going on top in the window and hitting new section or insert section. Functions are similar to scripts. They also, when you save them, have the .m extension. However, they are also very different because they don't share the same workspace. So everything you do in a function stays in a function and doesn't actually create or modify variables that are in your base workspace. And the function starts always with the word function. This is how you would do it. You declare one or more outputs if you want, and one or more inputs. And the name of the function will also be the name of your file. So in this case, my function.m. We talked about how to create a function called increase, which adds 1 to every input number. So here it's written x, but x would be whatever we put in here. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, any number. And then we talked about the function compute, which incorporates increase. And so first it increases the second number by 1, and then it adds it to the first number. And in between these two, we can put a help. So right below function, we put a help. Obviously, for help, we need to put the percentage sign. And then if we want to look up what the function does, or maybe we put some additional options into the function, well, we can all specify it there in the text, and then we just type in the command window help space and the name of the function, and it spits out all the help. Okay, this was about yesterday. As always, if you have questions, just ask. And today we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about flow control. So we're going to introduce if, for, switch, and while. Something else which is called try and catch. This is pretty fun. How you can, using commands, how you can ask Matlab to wait for an input. Yeah? So that you can actually interact with Matlab as if we're, I don't know, a robot or something. Some tips which are helping you maybe with programming and interacting with Matlab. And then, if you get there, how to improve the speed of your scripts or functions. Okay. Flow control refers to telling Matlab when to start or stop doing whatever it is supposed to do. For example, running a script or some command. And so we're going to start in this order. We're going to look at first at if, which is pretty straightforward. The name tells it tests between two different alternatives. It tests whether one alternative, for example, is true. So we start with if. We test whether something is true. For example, today is Wednesday. If it's true, we give it some instructions, like go to the Matlab class. And then if it's not true, we might give it to some other instructions, like go eat an ice cream. And that's it. Some examples of things we can test. For example, is A equal to 3? Remember that when we do a logical test, we put double equal. Otherwise, A equals 3 would be we create a variable which contains 3. That's not what we want to do here. A smaller than B, or we can test two things at the same time. So here we want to know if A is bigger than 4 and at the same time B is equal to 0. We can also use it with strings. Let's see an example. And you can type this at the same time. Okay, I'm going to go slowly. So if you create A equals 3, so far so good, we have created a variable A. Now, we want to see, with if, we want to test whether A is bigger than 0 and or smaller equal than 5. In that case, B, a new variable, should be 1. There's another case where A is bigger than 5 and smaller than 10. In that case, B should be 2. And in all other cases, meaning when A is bigger than 10 or equal to 10, then B is 0. Let me show you how this goes. This is exactly what I said, just in code. So we write if A bigger than 0 and A smaller or equal to 5, then, so that's on the new line, B equals 1. Else if, let's now introduce an alternative. And there's another if test basically. A bigger than 5 and smaller than 10. And you see we have to repeat the A, yeah? We cannot say A bigger than 5, smaller than 10. We have to repeat the A actually. And here I hit enter to go to the new line. B equals 2. That's the instruction we give it, if this is true. And in all other cases, which is if A is equal or bigger than 10, B becomes 0. Also remember that all this needs to end with the word end. Otherwise, it's going to wait for it. And it's not going to run. Sorry, did you guys manage? Did you do it?
I have a problem with the B. when I press enter after 5,
Yeah.
it is not in the middle, but in the left.
Where are you running? In the command window or in the editor?
Command.
Go in the editor.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, it wouldn't change anything, huh? It would still be the same, but it's called smart indent, and that happens in the editor. But the result would be the same if you do it in the command window. Other people? Yeah? You can play around with it, because A is equal to 3 now, but you can change A obviously. So try putting A to 6. What is the output then of B? Or try putting A to 20. What is the output? Funziona?
No, sto andando in regola.
Lo devo salvare prima di poter usare.
Okay, so if you hit the run button, yes, it asks you to save it. An alternative would be to select everything and then do F9 on the computer, or right click on a Mac, for example, is the easiest. Evaluate selection, it gives you also the shortcut. So you don't have to save it. It's perché tu hai fatto questo, no? Se fai quello si ti chiede di salvarlo. Fai select all. Right click. You can also, if you don't want to run it from the editor, you could also select all, copy it, and paste it straight into the command window. What you were doing before. That's also a possibility. Remember when I said whatever we do as a script, you can do in the command window? Well, it is still true, right? We can, line by line, we can write this into the command window and it will work. It will actually wait until we put the end once you started with if. Okay? Can I move on? Yeah? This is very similar, it's just another example. So A is now 5, and we create B, which is not a number anymore, but is a string. It's, for example, Monday. Yeah? You know how to create B equals Monday? So far so good? Then, what we want to test is, if A is 5 or 6, and B is Friday, then display this. Yeah, we can. However, if A is smaller than 5, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and B is Monday, then display oh not again. And in all other cases, display whatever. How do we do this? We do it like this. Here we test if A equals to 5 or, this is the sign for or, A equals to 6. And we want to compare B, which we created here, with the string Friday. Tiziana already learned this yesterday, maybe he remembers. I think you were there, right? We use the function string compare. It's written as strcmp, and because B, oh, this might actually be wrong. B doesn't have to be a cell, so you probably don't even need these curly brackets. So it's going to compare B to Friday, and the output of this is either 1 if it's true, or 0 if it's not true. So I'm asking, is the output of this equal to 1, meaning yes, it is Friday, So if these things are true, then I display that. This is the second test. And I display that. Tu hai casini con Mazda?
No,
No. String, ma ci sono quei due string, either Monday or Friday. Come si faccio dire più strumenti? Uno o l'altro. Non è tutti e due. No, so just put one word into B. Yeah.
And the B closes to compare without prefix because there's just one value inside.
Yeah, so if it were a cell, then you would need but I think if you create like that, sometimes the cell is just going to be a string, and so it should work without. That's my mistake. String compare. But if you don't know what it is, you just type help strcmp. Sì.
Sono ancora fuori di
Well, you didn't create any. Where is A? First you create A, right? There's no A. So you can create A. Okay, it's not similar. No, this is wrong. Okay, so first of all, this you're doing a logical test. You're testing whether B is equal to 1. That's not what we want to do here. We want to assign B to 1. So we want to put 1 to B. First, B equals 1. You know what? That's in the preferences that it puts. I hate it. It's barely usable. You can barely read it. And like, wow, preferences. No, perché è una roba orribile. Alan, Caroline. No, invece ti però che serve bene mettere la cultura dietro. Perché sennò a dove il display è disastro. Yeah, of course it works. It's just you will have the output here. There's something you usually want. And now, if you do Control A, and then type oh no, continue entering statements. So from before maybe it was still okay. Now that's right. This is next. That's right. Okay, did it work for everybody? Come on. Not finished. Prima del scuola. Jakob, hai finito?
Sì.
Ok. What is the problem? What's the matter?
Ah,
It's working.
yes.
Okay. I'll move on. So we looked into if. Now we're looking into for, and afterwards we're going to combine them also. For is good to create loops, yeah, and to repeat basically things as many times as you want. Basically, with the for, Matlab is going to start, and then it's going to look whether you are at the end of a vector, which you're going to give it. And the vector can be, for example, 1 to 5, or anything. It could contain numbers or strings, whatever elements. And if it's not at the end of the vector, it's going to do whatever you tell it to do, and it's going to increment the counter. So it's going to move down the vector. From 1, if it starts with 1, it goes to 2, etc. And once it hits 5, in this first example, it's going to stop to do the loop. You can name the counter the name you want. You can call it counter, you can call it Friday, you can call it weekend, whatever you want. Usually you choose a short name because you're going to use it then in your loop. Most of the time people use I or some stuff like that. I'm giving you now an example. Please try to type this in, start now, be fast and be precise, okay? So, we're going to take what we had before. Obviously you still have it, and we're going to loop it 6 times. And for each iteration, we're going to save I, which is the name of the counter, A and B, which were the outputs, in the matrix Z. So, this stuff you already had before. If A is bigger than 0, and A is smaller than 5, or smaller equal than 5, B equal to 1. Otherwise, if this is true, B equals to 2. And if none of these two are true, then B is equal to 0. Still have it? Yeah? Okay. Now we're going to put all this into a for loop, which starts here and ends here. And it's a loop that runs 6 times, because my counter, which is called I, and as I said, that's the name of the counter, which is completely arbitrary. You can call it Jacopo, Tiziano, Luca, whatever you want. Here I'm telling you, I starts with 1, then increases in steps of 1 until 6. So it's 6 loops, 6 iterations. And then just to make it change, at every iteration, A is going to be I times 2. So when I at the beginning is 1, this is 2, and then it becomes 4, etc. So that something actually changes, yeah? And here, I'm going to save into the matrix Z in different lines that change with I, okay? I1 is going to be the first line, I2 is going to be the second line. And in different columns, I save 3 different things. So in the first column, I save the number of the iteration. The second column, I save the output A. And the third column, I save the output B. So Z is going to be a matrix with as many lines as iterations and 3 columns. And then this is not really necessary, some clear, after each iteration, I clear A and B. Luca, l'hai fatto? Sì? Funziona? Can you guys run
Devo
it?
ancora fare una cosa di questo.
Lucia? Oh, remember to put, remember to put semicolon, because otherwise it shows you all these outputs which are horrible.
Cosa questo?
No, guarda la lavanda.
Ma sto guardando.
Qua. Sto salvando.
Sei
Save I in first column Z.
No, ho capito. Ma quindi il secondo punto è riferito a quello che c'è da sotto.
Ma counter e I. A e B sono i risultati, salva tutti e tre nella voce Z. C'è scritto come fare.
Sì, perché siamo un po'.
Everything okay? Does it work? No? Ah! Okay. So then it's okay. If you look here off,
Perché non
just
sto
get rid of.
guardando.
And now I'm looking at the run this for loop, or let's see like this.
Perché c'è una nota.
So you created Z, which has 6 lines and 3 columns, as you would expect it. And if you open, so here, do you see in the first column we have saved the I, so that goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The second column we have saved A, which not correct. You saved, yeah, because you didn't write it as what I wrote. I put in the second column, I put A, in the third column I put B. But I mean, you're almost there. It's just yeah. That's good. Yeah. Tu ce l'hai fatta?
Ho visto che uno di due, sì, qua sono uno di due.
Sì, sì, è giusto. Io ce l'ho stesso, sì, perché allora quando per esempio I è 5, I per 2 fa 10. Quindi la prima linea non è vera, perché A non è più piccolo di C. La seconda linea non è vera, perché A non è più piccolo di 10. Perché è 10. Quindi metti I uguale a 0. E quando
Sì, perfetto.
funziona? Okay. Everybody was able to do this?
No,
No?
there's some problem. Yeah. Don't know why it doesn't read the right way.
What? Did you do 8 equals 3?
No, stop after the loop. Before the loop started.
Yeah. For okay, so first thing is try to do so here's a thing called smart index.
So
Yeah, because and then okay, you want to start here. Okay. Ah, sì, sì, sì. So it was my mistake actually. The clear, the clear is not a good idea. Well, no, it is a good idea. Now I know what you didn't do. Look at my second line.
A1.
Yeah, I defined A in each iteration. Okay. I think we all managed this. Let's move on, okay? Switch. Switch is kind of similar to if. Some people prefer using switch. I don't know. I most of the time use actually for and if. Basically, you give it several choices, and depending on the choice, it's gonna do one or the other instruction. An advantage is maybe that when you spell out, when you have several things to test, or then it's kind of easier because you can put them all next to each other, and it's going to become clearer. I'm going to give you an example. So let's do this together. Let's create. You can do a clear all. Then you do a equals 3. And now we want to do a script that displays the content of a as a string when a is 1, 3, or 5. And if a is anything else, display this string here. A is not 1 or 3 or 5. The way we do it is like this. So we define a, for example 3. Then we have to write switch, not capital, switch, so in small caps, switch of a. Then we give the cases 1, 3, and 5. So you see we put the options already here. And if we have, for example, if one case is whether a is 1 or 3, we could put in a vector here with 1 and 3. Otherwise, it's very similar to using if and if else, right? Or then is the word otherwise, which is like else in when using if. And indeed, I'm putting you here the same, scripted as the same thing, only using if. And so here we would write if a equals 1, display this, else if a equals 3, else if a equals 5, and in the end, else.
So switch always one case to set up the alternatives.
One case, what?
Switch wants a case in order to set up the different alternatives.
Yeah, you need case. You need the words switch, case, and otherwise, and end. I mean, otherwise, if you want to give it an otherwise option, you don't have to.
So case is the value assigned to case refers to the variable you define into switch, always.
Exactly. So here defines if a is 1, if a is 3. Yeah. And so if I had asked you display something, for example, let's say that display a is 1 if a is 1 or 10 or 100. With if, we would need to say if a equals 1 or a equals 10 or a equals 10. So it gets a little bit long to write. And here we could just put a vector 1, 10, 100. So from that perspective, switch is actually pretty cool.
Now, can you repeat
So
it?
here, for example, case 2, 3. Cosa? Yeah.
I have a string that I want to switch. I just need to put the
What's up? Oh.
yeah, this Matlab Class. It's kind of confusing.
So you're asking if the variable is not a number,
Yeah.
but a string. I think you would also just would work the same, but it's a question. As I said, I don't use switch very often.
Okay.
I would have to try out. Or maybe you can try it out later. Did you guys manage?
Yes.
Yeah? So you can see how it's similar, switch and if. I think they run also the same speed. So in terms of computational speed, it's Can I move on? Yeah? So we talked about the for loop. The for loop does a specific number of iterations. So if you tell it go I equals 1 to 6, it does 6 iterations. We also have something which is called while, and which will run forever if you don't make it stop. And why don't you just type into the command window while 1, new line, this, infinity, new line, end, and see what happens.
Un altro problema.
Con Matlab? O...
Ma personale.
Che altri problemi?
Quello tanti. No, una variabile che celle.
So, is it running?
Yes.
Yes.
What is it doing?
Infinity.
Infinity. Yeah, that's a problem,
And
huh?
now?
Hit Control C, Control C.
Right.
Questo
qui sì. Questa viene mista. Sempre tutti e due.
Devi fare la concatenazione. Scrivi qua while 1 this little boy. No, lo puoi fare qua. Enter this. Scrivi quello che vuoi. Control C. Okay, so you saw in this practical example that while loops, they can be cool, but they're also dangerous. Yeah, Control C to stop it. Control C. Does it not stop? You go into the command window and Control C. Ciao Paolo. So let's do now a while loop that makes more sense. So if you create x equals 1 and y equals 10, just start typing this. And now we want to create a while loop that continues to add 1 to y until y reaches 20. So it should be 10 loops. And then we use x to break this while loop. That's how it looks. So we define x and y. Say while x equals 1, do this. And if y equals 20, well, x is true. So this is no longer true. Therefore, it's going to stop the while loop. So here what I did is I add 1 to y. This is not necessary, but if you want, you can also display y. In order to display it, you need first to transform it to a string because it's a number. Working already? You are fast. Okay. Everybody managed? No. No?
And then we use different typesetting.
Okay. Dice continuing statement, perché prima hai fatto qualcosa e non hai messo l'ultimo end. Quindi vedi che... No, adesso l'ha fatto. So you should get the numbers 11, 12, etc. to 20 in your command. Yeah? No?
Why we go
Oh, not the string is because you cannot say this and y because it's I mean try it. Y is 20. If you just write this y. Oh, actually you're right. You don't need to.
No,
So this actually takes without considering X is a string and text is displayed. Faccio z uguale
sto ancora andando.
Yeah, it's actually not necessary. I'm seeing now.
Quando
Same. So the num to string is, I mean, it doesn't harm, but it's not necessary here. You can just say this before. Okay? You fetch it?
Because I don't understand why we should use why.
Oh, for example, I create, for my experiments, I create for every participant another list of trials. The order of trials is semi-randomly created. Okay? So for example, I want a random order, but I never want more than 3 trials of the same emotion, also if I'm presenting emotional faces, after each other. So what I do is that, you know, I create my list in Matlab randomly, and then I go test it. And if I find that more than 3 trials of the same emotion are following each other, then I restart the loop. So, you know, I could use while to do that. I can say while more than 3 emotions of the same type are following each other, create a random list. And once the random list corresponds to my criteria, stop while. That's a good example, no? You could use it for other things. Okay? So, to summarize, we saw the main for me, didn't put switch in here, the main for me are if, for, and while. So the if we use on the same line, we put whatever we want to test. If you have more than one test, we need to repeat, for example, the name of the variable. So here we want to see a is bigger than 0 and a is smaller equal to 5, we have to repeat the name of the variable. Enter. Next line, we put what the instructions Matlab should do. Here it's create b equal to 1, or put b equal to 1. If you have another test, we use else if. If you have all other possibilities, we put else. Always end with end. So
If we have an if statement nested in an if statement, we need 2 ends at the end.
yes. And if you have 10 if statements, nested, you need 10 ends. Yes. And the way you can actually not drown in chaos is by using the smart indent. So the fact that, you know, the second if is going to start here, and the third here, and the end is also going to be in the same column. For, we give it a counter. Here in this case it's I, it could be any other name. And here we tell it to go from 1 to 6, but we So these are 6 loops, but it could be anything else. And and here you see, for example, an if nested in the for itself. That's what I meant with smart indent. So this for has an end here, and this if has an end here. Okay. And while we just saw here is just another example, I could say as long as I is not equal to 0, do this, and all of a sudden, if none of the ifs are true, then I is put to 0, and therefore the while loop stops. Okay? So, and something else, which is called try and catch, which can be useful if sometimes error messages can come up. And instead of MATLAB showing them and interrupting everything, you catch them, okay? And you can modify them if you want. So for example, here I create A and B. I mean, you can, if you want, type this, but I'm not going to wait until you're done, yeah? Because I need to move on. These are two matrices of different sizes, and therefore the vertical concatenation is not working. It gives me an error. Error using wordcat, dimensions are not consistent. Now, if instead of doing this, I run this, and I tell it, try this, if it doesn't work, catch the message. This stands for message, not actually error, but exception, I think. But anyway, what it does is it catches exactly this here, and then I can modify it. And I can test, for example, I can say if the difference in size of the columns, so here I'm looking at the size of B in the second dimension, which is the number of columns, minus the number of columns in A, if that is bigger or equal to 3, display this. The difference in columns is more than 3. Otherwise, if it's smaller than 3, say, well, it's below 3. I don't know, this is just an example I came up with. It's not very useful because it's not going to concatenate anyway, but it's just to introduce you to this idea of try and catch. Okay? Something else I wanted to show you because it's really cool is input, where you can ask MATLAB to ask a question to the user, and it's waiting for the user to give an answer. And so maybe let's type this together. If you type Q equals input, and then in quotes, do you like MATLAB? In the end, you need to put S so that it knows it's a string, yeah? Because you're gonna answer yes or no. Are you typing? So once you have written that, we can use, for example, switch, or we can use if. If you say switch, you need to put, so the output of that is going to go into Q. And so if you answered yes and hit enter here, then it displays greatly true. If you entered no and hit enter, it displays you are doomed. And if you didn't enter anything, you just hit enter, or if you put something else, it says sorry what. So you can write in the editor either this with that or this with that. Yeah? And then run it and see what happens. Does it not work, Tiziano?
No,
Works?
but for instance, the
What?
HI 49.
Ah, okay.
Procedi di qua.
Yeah. Well, you need to put age as a number. I need to put it into string.
Amount to string?
Yes.
You can only use. And does it display these?
Comunque, cioè sono contento che tu faccia esercizi, però non stai attento a quello che sto facendo qua.
Mi metto adesso.
So, do you like yes, no? No, you put an input. Right, yes. Enter.
Sorry, what? Yes.
Perché scritto yes a questo punto era finito. Quindi lui ha semplicemente come diceva cioè lui fa che suona solo volta.
Ah, perché dove fare uno stream. Lui aspetta uno
Se no puoi fare un loop nel quale sapete all'infinito finché non ti voglia di
Cioè se metto sì, inizio sì, però
Sì,
ok, sempre giusto.
vai? CS si incazza.
Okay, so everybody did it with the switch? Yeah. Okay, then later or at home, if you want, you can try it with the if. There, I mean, I tried this and it worked without doing a string compare, but it didn't work anymore when I didn't put anything because it had a problem with size. So I think in this case you do need a string compare. So you see, in this case, switch is actually kind of easier. But otherwise it's the same logic. You test if this is true, or this is true, or nothing is true. Okay, I'm almost finished, so I'm moving on. I want to give you some tips. I don't know, maybe the word tips is even exaggerated, but these are small things which make you faster and make it easier to program. You might already know that if you push the arrow up, you can see the command you gave before, and you can go back and forth between the commands. You can also start typing the name of the command, or of a function, or a variable you created, and then put tab. If there's only one completion which is possible, Matlab is automatically going to complete it. And if there's several ones, it's going to offer you a list of completions. Oh, that's what I just said. Okay, then sometimes you're running a very long line, for example with the if this and that, etc. Well, you want to go to the next line, but you still actually have to stay on that line, because otherwise it thinks you're giving it the instructions. In if, the second line will give the instructions. So how do we go to the next line without that Matlab thinks that you finish that command? Space, 3 dots, and hit enter. No? I put it here. So like that, if you're running in the editor, it's like in R, I don't know, but in Python I think it's 3 quotes. If anybody is working with Python.
In R there's 3 points, one next to the other, and then
In R you can just go directly to the next line.
Yeah.
Just without putting anything.
Yeah. Okay. This should be shortcuts. So use word cuts, and you can change the word cuts under preferences, keyboard shortcuts in Matlab. But so here are some of the common ones. They're different depending on whether you're using a Windows machine or a Mac. And I tried to put them, for example, F9 you already use maybe. If you selected parts of the code, type F9. In Matlab it would be this. In Mac it would be this. Also commenting or uncommenting a line or several lines. You can do it automatically. And finally, you know, once you have a script which is running, you want it to run faster, or sometimes, you know, you're doing operations which are very intense, and your computer is sort of suffering and getting slow. There's many ways you can improve the speed of your script, and you can read it up here. And I'm just introducing one, which is you can distribute the workload. Either if you have a computer with many cores, as we usually do now, you can distribute, for example, if you're running many loops at the same time, you can distribute them to different cores, or to different computers. If you have a computer cluster, let's imagine these are all computers and they're connected to each other, and you can just, from one computer, send the data to be computed in all computers, and Matlab's going to do it automatically for you. If you use part 4, for example, instead of 4, you can run a loop spread over cores of your computer, or computers in a cluster. So this again is like not doing anything which makes sense, but I found something which, if I run it on my Mac, which is really powerful, but nevertheless it takes 28 seconds to do. How do I know how much time it takes? I put tick before these for loops and talk at the end. It's pretty cool to measure the timing of your operation. And the output, as you see, is 28 seconds. And if I just change this 4 into part 4, it goes down to 15 seconds, which is not an amazing gain in speed, but it's better.
Because you have 2 cores.
Yeah, actually I thought I had 4, but somehow it's using only 2.
Why you need to change the settings of the cores to use, I think.
Yeah, well, I don't know, I haven't figured it out completely. But, I mean, this is not a problem for you right now. Maybe it will become in the future, depending on what you're doing. If you're analyzing big data sets, maybe this will be interesting for you. Okay, and actually I finished. Yes?
Can we store talk in a variable?
Can we start what?
Can we store it in a variable? The time measuring.
Yeah. Yeah. Should work. More questions? We are done here. Okay? Yeah. Oh, so just so obviously now we do a short break, then we exercises. The longer the break you do, the less time you have for exercises. One more thing though, we have 3 lessons left, and I asked you yesterday to tell me what you want us to do. So tomorrow, I think it's going to be Amir is going to do the lesson and exercises. It's all about you building graphical user interfaces, so that should be fun. And then we have still 2 sessions left, where we could do only exercises, or we could repeat something you want us to repeat, or you could come with your own questions about analyzing data. And obviously we cannot analyze the data, but maybe we can help you. So what do you guys want to do?
You want more exercise of what we learned, or you want like a real project? I mean, an example project that, for example, I'm working on, or maybe Sebastian is working on, and